Hello, welcome back. It's good to, see everyone again. Hope you enjoyed the first video, hope you enjoyed the first unit. We're going to go ahead and get right into ecology, talking a little bit about energy flow and energy transfer between organisms. So that's our main focus for today. So I hope you'll join me in this little adventure that I like to call energy flow. And this is video 2-1 for Center Grove Global Campus Biology. So, what are our objectives today? Well, our goals today, you're going to be able to explore the different ways that life is organized. Life is organized in many different ways, starting from the lower levels like the species and the population, and work your way up to communities and ecosystems, and we'll take a look at that. And then you'll also be able to analyze how energy flows through an ecosystem. Energy is limited in our universe, so it's important to understand how it flows through an ecosystem. Ready? Let's begin. The first thing I want to do is introduce the concept of ecology. And simply put, ecology is the study of organisms and their relationships with other organisms and the environment. Ecology is the study of how organisms use their environment, how they live in their environment, and how they survive within their environment. It's important to note that this involves the relationship with other organisms as well. So, those relationships are extremely important for the success of the organism, whether they're beneficial to the organism, whether they're detrimental to the organism. It's all very important. And all of these organisms live within the ecosystem, so it's a very enclosed environment, and there's a lot of things that are going on there that have an impact on the relationships. And we're going to look at all of those different things that impact it here in just a moment. The first thing I want you to understand is that this concept of the biosphere, and you break that word down, it's pretty simple. Bio means life, and sphere is a sphere. So when I talk about the biosphere, I'm talking about the portion of the earth that supports life. And pretty much makes sense. And that's broken down into two key factors, the first being abiotic factors, and the second being biotic factors. Abiotic factors are non-living components of an ecosystem, so things like rocks, the ground, temperature, precipitation, weather, things that are non-living that have an impact on an organism's life. And then there are biotic factors, living things that affect an organism's life as well, such as other organisms or grasses, plants, trees, other organisms like I've said before. So you have the combination of living and non-living that make up this biosphere in which all organisms live. So where do we live? Well, there's a lot of different words for that. We're going to describe each one in detail. The first one is an ecosystem, and that's all the living and non-living parts. So when I talk about an ecosystem, I'm including both the biotic factors and the abiotic factors that exist within an ecosystem. A habitat is simply the geographic location in which an organism lives, whether it lives in the United States or in Canada or in Indianapolis or in Greenwood or any location where an organism lives. It might be in a hole in the ground, it might be in a tree, it might be in a house. Those are examples of habitat. Niche, however, is the specific role an organism has. And niche can be a multitude of different things. It can be how it hunts for food, or simply just the things that it eats, how it interacts with other organisms. Two organisms cannot share the same niche. That is a big issue because that creates competition, right? You're competing for the same food sources. You're competing for the same ways of getting those food sources. That generates competition. And competition always results in one organism that wins and one organism that loses. Now, typically in a sports game, that's fine, but in life, the winner gets to live and the loser dies. So the stakes are a little bit higher here when we talk about habitat and niche. But three key terms, ecosystem, habitat, and niche, are all important in describing what an organism does and lives in an ecosystem. So what are some ways that organisms interact? Well, the first, these are all called symbiotic relationships. That is, these are relationships that occur between different organisms. The first one is what's called mutualism. And mutualism is where both organisms benefit from the relationship. If you've ever seen Finding Nemo, you could understand this relationship from the clownfish and the sea anemone. The picture shown below shows some birds picking off some of the parasites that exist on these animals here. So that is beneficial for both. The birds are able to get food for themselves and is able to avoid things like parasites or things that may harm it. So both of these organisms benefit from this type of relationship. The second is what's called commensalism. And commensalism is where one organism benefits and the other really doesn't benefit or suffer as a result of the interaction. So for example, a blue whale, as you see down here, has barnacles on it. Now the barnacles really don't affect the blue whale in any way, shape, or form. They don't really benefit him and they really don't cause him harm in any way, shape, or form. However, the barnacles benefit because they are filter feeders. And filter feeders must have water move through them in order for them to be able to eat and survive. The barnacles here, because of the movement of the blue whale, are able to survive and benefit because that movement through the water allows them to feed and survive. So commensalism, just to recap, is where one organism benefits and the other neither benefits nor suffers as a result of the interaction. The last interaction is what's known as parasitism. And this is where one organism benefits while the other one suffers. And as you can see here, there's a picture of a tick on human skin. The tick benefits because it gets blood that is necessary for its survival. And the human suffers because it's itchy, it's painful, and can possibly transmit diseases like Lyme disease. One thing to make note of is that the tick doesn't necessarily want the human to die. That would not be beneficial to the parasite. The parasite wants the organism to live because if the human dies, then there is no more blood in order for the parasite to benefit. So it's important to understand that parasites typically don't want organisms to die, they just want to be able to feed off of them for their own survival. So they want to harm them enough to where they get the benefit out of it, but they don't want to kill them. So we have three different types of relationships and ways that organisms can interact: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. So when we talk about all of these different relationships, it's important to understand how organisms are able to obtain energy. And there are two ways that organisms can do this, the first being an autotroph. Auto simply means self, and troph, loosely translated, means feeding. So autotrophs are self-feeders. They're able to make their own energy. So this includes things like the sun. Anything that takes energy from the sun is an autotroph. So plants, trees, grasses, shrubs, flowers, anything that is able to perform photosynthesis can take energy from the sun and make it its own. Some organisms, particularly on the bottom of the ocean floor, can perform what's called chemosynthesis, where they're able to take energy from chemical bonds that exist in chemicals and make their energy from that. The other type, and the one we're probably more familiar with, are heterotrophs. And those organisms obtain energy from other organisms. For example, humans are heterotrophs. We are required to eat other organisms, whether it be plant or animal, in order to obtain their energy. So things like herbivores, only eating plants, carnivores, only eating flesh, omnivore, eating both, or detritivores, only eating dead things. All of these are different types of heterotrophs that obtain energy from other organisms. One thing to make note is that all of the energy that is obtained in heterotrophs was once existed within the autotrophs. So it's important to note that all of the energy that exists on this planet comes from the sun. The sun is the reason why anything is here. So if we take that sun away, everything would die, because everything starts off with plants, regardless of whether you eat them directly or eat other organisms that eat plants as well. So how does energy flow? Well, energy flows from the bottom to the top. Energy flows from the primary producers that you see down there on the bottom up until you get to the quaternary consumers near the top. Energy flows from the bottom to the top. It starts off with the sun. The primary producers are able to take the sun's light and perform photosynthesis to make energy out of it. Other organisms eat other organisms, including the plants, in order to obtain that energy. Each level within this energy flow is called a trophic level, and that's simply just a position that exists in the two food chains that exist here to the right. One important thing to understand is that only 10% of the energy gets transferred, so 90% of the energy that one ingests or takes from the sun is lost performing normal bodily functions or is lost as heat to the environment. So think about like when you run around and you ingest food, your energy is being expended there. All right, same with any other organism that exists, they expend energy. And so as a result, only 10% of the energy gets transferred. Because this small amount of energy gets transferred, this results in fewer organisms and higher trophic levels. So you're going to see many more plants than you would insects, mice, snakes, and eagles eating the snakes. Again, results in fewer organisms and higher trophic levels. So that's why plants and other smaller animals outnumber the higher trophic level organisms like killer whales or eagles or even humans on the energy flow scale. So again, energy flow, we can look at food chains, which is just simply a linear arrangement of how energy flows, or food webs, where multiple chains are put together. Food webs are a little bit more realistic because not one organism eats just one particular thing. For example, you look here, you can see that the jackal eats both the rabbit and the goat, and the lion eats the goat, the jackal, and the wildcat. So you can see that the energy flow comes in from different organisms, just like it normally would within an ecosystem. Typically, we don't use food chains, but when we look at energy flow, we use pyramids to show the amount of energy. So let's look at the pyramid here. And we start off with 100% of our energy at the bottom. And if you remember, only 10% of the energy gets transferred to the next trophic level. So we have producers down at the bottom, and those are the ones that make the energy, so things like plants. Primary consumers are what eat the plants, so you're looking at things like cows and other organisms that tend to eat producers. And only 10% of that energy gets transferred. The rest is lost to the environment as heat. As we go up to the next level, which is secondary consumers, which eat the primary consumers, we see that only 1% of the original energy is available. That's because 10% gets lost. 10% gets lost going from the primary consumer to the secondary consumer. And then 10% gets lost again. So when we look at the tertiary consumers compared to the producers, only 0.1% of the energy that was originally available is still available to the tertiary consumers. So you can see why there are less tertiary consumers than there are producers. And there are other pyramids as well that represent this. We use the term biomass, bio meaning life and mass meaning the mass of the substance. And that is in a pyramid form as well. So for example, you look at the pyramid on the right, 1,000 kilograms of producers supports 1,000 kilograms of herbivores. And that supports 10 kilograms of primary carnivores and 1 kilogram of the top carnivore. So you can see how that has a pyramid effect as well. You can also look at numbers to understand this. And that 10,000 freshwater shrimp can support 1,000 bleak, which is a type of fish, 100 perch, which is another type of fish, 10 northern pike, and 1 osprey, which is a type of bird. So 1 osprey relies on 10,000 freshwater shrimp for energy. It's amazing to think about it that way, but that's exactly how it works with energy flow within an ecosystem. So again, looking back at the objectives, hopefully you understand a little bit about the different ways that life is organized and be able to analyze how energy flows through an ecosystem. We'll do a couple more videos to describe this, but I want you to remember to make sure that you fill out the form at the end of this so that you get your points for watching the video. Thanks, and have a great day.